So I am recording today with Lydia Joy, who I've been listening to your podcasts. I was listening to your first podcast it sounds like it's your latest podcast effort, that there were previous ones. And Valentine's Day, it's not last year now, it's the year before last now, 2020. You recorded your first podcast of this series. And then I've been listening to the latest ones also. I made some notes. I have questions to ask you, but I wanted to just start out our recording by referencing that we met as part of Health Freedom for Humanity. And I'm working with Pittsburgh IPR, which is Intuitive Public Radio, and the survivors groups who are organizing resourcing for people at violent intersections, people whose needs are often not considered by the very systems that claim to be supporting those people. And so we have a lot of common intersections when it comes to health freedoms and when it comes to making our own decisions as regards the health of our bodies. These conversations have come into the world in some very, very powerful ways just these last few years. And one of the things that I noticed was that first episode of this podcast series happened at the beginning of 2020. And I wanted to sort of ask you like what that was like for you, because I haven't been able to listen to all of the earlier episodes, but there's a context. There's a context there. And I would love to know more about how that weaved together for you.
Well, I had no idea what was coming. That's for sure. I took the leap. So yeah, so the start of my podcast was it was in gestation for however long, right? And I had done one previously with someone years prior. And when we ended it, it was a congenial ending for both of our needs to go different directions. I was like, oh, I got to get back to this one of these days, but I'm not sure I want to go the same direction. And I think I was working through a lot of my own inner stuff, coming into myself, all of that, like allowing myself to be my full self, so like wrestling along the way. And finally, it was just like this one hit of like, oh, I got to do this again, but I want to morph it. And I wasn't quite sure how it would look, but I felt very called. So, it was just the prep work and getting the launch going. And then like, oh, when should I start? All that. But it just kind of happened around February. And it's interesting that you said February 14th. It's like, I totally forgot the first date. But yeah, it was a beautiful beginning. And then of course, having to try to kind of like adapt along the way as life unfolded during that year, right? Not really sure how to show up and share, but wanting to and feeling compelled to still be a voice for others, support whatever was coming through me. So you'll get a little bit of the nerdy stuff, the biochemistry and mineral work that I do comes out a lot in my podcasts, but I really love the whole person, the whole self, mind, body, soul, spirit, emotions, understanding how our past has shaped us and our conditioning has shaped us so we can be now here as us, growing, expanding, evolving, becoming, unleashing. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm all about unleashing. Unleashing is great. Right? I really love how much you center on being able to tune into what moves you, being able to tune into what makes your body feel stronger, to what you really can stay in a state of loving what you're doing and what you're focusing on. And you have a lot of focuses on pleasure and it being good and healthy. to experience pleasure. And that we have a lot of conversations in the network, because it is a network that has been largely by-end for sex trafficking survivors. And so we have a lot stacked against being able to recognize that it's okay to feel good in our bodies, but that's not where you stop. For health, for stability, for resilience, we need to be able to feel good in our bodies. And the word pleasure feels transgressive to say. All of these different ways. And there are a lot of people who have not specifically survived these particular kinds of violence that already recognize in their lives, because of the ways that stressors are applied in the world right now. And that's connected to trafficking operations. If you know how the trafficking operations work, then you recognize how people in everyday situations are affected by the stressors of the trafficking operations in their vicinities. And that's why people in everyday situations also feel, why is it not okay for me to feel good? Why is it not okay for me to do the work that is most moving to me? Why do I have to follow these strictures that don't seem to make any sense? And people are just sort of expecting that we just like put our noses to the grindstone. We keep doing what we've always been doing, which is extremely unhealthy. And we're seeing that unfold in some particular ways. And so like our conversations, so many different people who have been living at very different, I keep using the word intersections, and that's sort of different for everybody that I talk to, but it's been a really useful word for us, because people come from such widely different life experiences, but there is essential learning modalities, there is essential healing modalities where bodies can tune into where the body needs to be in order to feel its best and do its most amazing things. And there's a lot that you talk about as a matter of course in your audio materials that is really powerful about that, and that really needs to be centered a lot more everywhere in helpful ways instead of co-opted ways. Like we've all come into contact with health influences that seem to say all of the right things and then do this financial extraction game, or happen to be aligned with influences that are unfortunately causing a lot of violence. And so finding people in our communities who want to work on this and who want to talk about these topics has been really important to me. And I've been having a very hard time finding people in Pennsylvania who weren't already very, very severely affected. So it's been really exciting for me to connect with Health Freedom for Humanity in Pennsylvania. And I found you, and I found quite a few other people that I'm really excited to be talking to. Do you want to say more about your landscape of any of that? I know I just said a lot of things.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've lost in the health realm, let's call it a realm, because, well, it depends on what realm you're in, right?
There are some realms, yeah.
I know. So if you're thinking like mainstream and you've been alive on the planet, you know, in this last 50 to 70 years, you are more familiar with allopathic. And what that should have been founded on, and it did not remain true, was the concept of first do no harm. And so we don't know that as a population, right? We don't think of that. I've heard it repeatedly because of my background, my training, you know, just researching and studying health from all different original modalities prior to the allopathic hijack.
And I want to say women's nutritional health, which is also a really important set of subjects for us. I don't think I said that explicitly in the recording, so I just wanted to call that out.
Yeah, even in the nutrition circles, you know, for women too, there's been a lot of male-centric nutrition advice that we feel like we're being shouted at about too. So there's a lot going on that we have to see it for what it is, I think. And it doesn't always feel so great once we're like looking at it a little bit more. It's not very fun. It's rather rather horrible, honestly.
There are some
I don't.
pretty, I mean, I have specific related details to some of this stuff that's really, it's really
Yeah.
horrifying to people. When it feels mildly uncomfortable to be in an environment, sometimes that's connected to very, very, very bad things happening invisibly in that
Yes.
environment. And so when we free ourselves up in the ways that you are sharing with people, it really does a lot to help us recognize this stuff together. And I don't mean to interrupt you. I wanted to let you keep talking.
Yeah, it's yeah. So I'm in a space. I do online consulting and coaching, and I hear the stories, all the stories, and I'm just really, it's nothing should shock me anymore, but it still is very shocking because I just don't understand. I don't comprehend it as a loving human, loving soul. Like, how could this be? How could this be what we're experiencing? But it's real. And so a lot of people will have been, traumatized enough to be like, I don't even know if I can trust anyone, And so I really, understand that and spend a lot of time just sharing whatever comes through, but also based on having a lot of conversations with a lot of women, particularly. And so I think what's really beautiful though, in the flip, once we really see this and be with it for a bit, we don't have to stay there, but I think it's important to recognize, right? And realize, wow, that shouldn't have happened to me, right? Because I think a lot of people maybe aren't, it's like the frog in the pot of boiling water, right? We've been alive on the planet. We've been exposed by design to these broken systems that have had agendas behind them. And, we simmer along, and then one day our bodies are screaming, or something, rough comes up, or whatever it may be. We all have, there's various stories, right? I mean, mine is pretty intense too, which led me into this, by the way, but we kind of need to see that, right? And sit with that and recognize that, so we don't take on some sense of blame or shame, or, I did something wrong per se, right? And then that part's tough, but once we can see that and really work through that and be supported through that, and it's not like, oh, it's once and done. I mean, it's definitely an evolving thing that's multi-layered, but the beautiful other side is we now get to move in the other direction. We don't have to stay in that way of being that happened to us. Let's be honest. I mean, I really do believe we can take personal responsibility, but at the same time, I really do think a lot has happened to us.
Far more than we've been given any language to recognize. We're having to invent languages to recognize what's happening to us. We have to change the ways that we use words in order to say, no, this is gaslighting. This is abusive. Like, we're not gonna keep using systems that do this. That's
right.
It's suicidal to use systems that treat us that way. And, many people, like, we go through our lives and we have this vague sense that there's something wrong, but we have no idea where that's coming from. And we don't know who to listen to. And there's all this noise. And one of the things that we talk about a lot also is that people who have tremendous power in their lives are being inculcated to think they are powerless, and that they shouldn't stand up for themselves, and that they shouldn't feel good, and that they shouldn't make their lives good. They shouldn't work on behalf of their families. They should, there are a lot of things that are taking people away from their families and away from their communities to serve interests that are not interested in the well-being of those families and those communities. And so each person, and we talk about this in groups of very severely disabled people, very severely affected trauma survivors, who are otherwise excluded from all environments just because people don't understand them or understand what's happened to them. And we know that this is true for us. And we also know that it's true for people who have not had that particular kind of violent experience, where all of us have this power inside us that can suddenly open up, that we didn't at all realize was there because of the way we've all been treated in all of the circumstances of our lives. It's been stacked against us to recognize that that's there. And when we find it there and we share it with one another, whatever you think is hopeless, however you think you're helpless,
Right.
You're not helpless. And that's it's such a huge thing, and it gives me goosebumps, and I like repeating it as often as possible.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, we're unstoppable as a human spirit. Like there's nothing that once you know, phew, and but you're right, it's all of this oppression that's really made it challenging to break out. And it's so interesting that you said we're so powerful, because yesterday I had a really big, like, whoa, I woke up to myself again. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it was like something I needed to see more deeply, something I saw and, worked through to a point, but I needed to go further. And it was like, whenever something happens in like threes, I know it's like, pay attention, pay attention. So I had this like big kind of like revelation after a conversation with someone on the heels of saying to another friend, I don't know how powerful I am yet. I mean, I'm starting to, but there's so much more. I don't even know yet. And so then I'm having a conversation with another woman and she's in her power. And I'm like, whoa, you're making me want to be more in my power. And then I had this whole thing of like, oh my gosh, I had this blog post I wrote 3 years ago about self-doubt, killing your dreams. And that's where the pleasure conversation comes in too, by the way, because really it is about allowing that pleasure, even if it's like the joy of knowing who, like being you, like recognizing, wait a minute, I'm pretty cool. And there's no one like me and there's no one like you. And you like, it's not like this ego thing. It's like a realization of like, wow, we are all so amazing. And so I had this whole thing. And then I remembered that like quote by Marianne Williamson, like our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our greatest fear is not that we are, what is that quote? Oh, I'm going to butcher it. But the part about it was like that we are powerful.
Yeah, that we're actually that powerful is the thing we're afraid of, rather than, I can't remember the words either, but it's a good quote. We should find it. We'll find it.
Yeah, we'll find it, because if you think about it for just a second, you're like, well, really? Like, because you don't actually know how powerful you are. So you can't even really like grasp that. You're like sitting there like, what?
Yeah.
I'm afraid of that. Like, I don't even know what you're talking. Right.
The very nature of it means that you don't know what you're capable of. You just don't.
Right. You don't know what you're capable of. And, but the big thing is like, we can't stay in the smallness that are, let's say the suppressors. I don't like saying that because it gives power to that, but like we kind of have to give context, right? So this energy of suppression that we've been under, I don't think it's so powerful that we can't be powerful, but like it certainly has had a place for many of us. And I know for me, growing up in the context that I grew up, woof, some limited belief systems, some dogma, some really gross, like conflicting, like, oh, your heart is so deceitful, like all these kind of things, like we could go way back to through our whole lives and start to see it. I was like, oh my gosh, that was this and that was that. And that really held me back. And so when we come to this point of like facing the fact that we really are powerful, it really is just a choice at that point of stepping in and continuing to just like show up every day and step in and surprising ourselves along the way too. Right. But, I don't know. So for me, it was really powerful because I needed to recognize it in another person to recognize it in me. And, I don't know where if this is like connecting to what you originally asked me, but I think that's a big part of my heart for showing up on the podcast, is using my voice to express as much as I can to, help shine my light, to give other people permission as well. So it's, that's a big part of our healing journey, and becoming whole. We already are, but it is kind of like we have to get rid of the conditioning and all this other junk that's clogging us up to feel whole, or recognize that we're already whole, and then embody that. And then it manifests more and more and more as we're alive on the planet. Right. So
Yeah.
you had said something too. I think about this, just like all the stress of life and staying busy and being taken away from what's most important. Right. Is that what you were kind of?
Yeah. The stressors, many of the stressors are crafted artfully to take us away from our relationships, our families, and our communities, unfortunately. Yeah. And we need to be able to tell the difference because we want to support technology. And I don't just mean like high tech technology. I mean low tech technology. I mean human technologies of choosing to interact with one another in certain ways, and choosing to build together or to explore together in certain ways. We want to support the kind of technology that is really inherent and emergent in living beings who are treating one another respectfully and honorably. We don't want to support these big industries that are saying, oh, there's nothing we can do. We have to hurt these people. We have to hurt these beings. We don't know another way. That's no longer true. It's definitely, I mean, like, probably wasn't true in all of these different cases all through history, but now we know it's definitely not true, that we don't need to harm one another in order to have our needs met. And so many people feel like they can't access their own sense of powerfulness because they've been told that they have that they're better as victims, and they have to rely on being victims in certain ways, and that's just the way of things. But what that means is that somebody's still gaslighting you, somebody's still hurting you. Let's call that out. Let's stop that shit, and let's focus on this other stuff that is actually regenerative. Because people get stuck. It's not just getting stuck in the victim mentality, it's getting stuck in the my brain's not working quite well enough to be able to call out the gaslighting as it is. I know there's something going wrong, but I don't know how to say. I don't know how to stand up for myself. And so then we end up really needing to model for one another. Here's what it looks like when I'm standing up for myself. Here's what it looks like when I'm deciding that my body deserves to feel good. It's even hard for me to say, my body deserves to feel good. Venus just stationed direct. I want to mention.
I know. I'm only like a baby in astrology, but I feel this energy right now.
Yeah.
I'm so relieved. Yeah, honestly, I've definitely, so gaslighting is something I was familiar with from many areas of my life, which I recognized, and it was harsh and it was ugly. And then I recognized it in another area of my life, and then another area of my life. And then, I retracted from allopathic medicine over a decade ago. And I've just been doing my own thing, because to me, removing myself was protection and a boundary I needed to recover my nervous system, to recover so many things. And it wasn't a quick process, but it was so necessary. And I think we don't give ourselves permission a lot of times to do the retraction that we need, right? Like to pull out and just like move towards, to some degree, I think we need protection, but to some degree we need the right support. And for me, that was really hard to find, because so much triggered me for so long. But I think when I really started to understand the body, the human body and our physiology, in addition to the psychological, aspects of gaslighting, I realized, wait, I can build my body back. I can support my body. I can nourish my body. I can, and it doesn't have to be done in this intense, harsh, hurry up, do all these things to myself way. It can be gentle. It can be loving. It can be slow. It can be pleasurable. It can be, and I would still recall one of the first times where I gave myself permission to just go into the woods with zero agenda. It seems like such a simple thing, right? But like, I didn't know how to do that anymore in my hyper vigilant state of, back in that time. And it can be just the simplest return to nature's ways that can remind us of how the synergy of nature is so loving and perfect and beautiful. And, like I think you said something too a minute ago, but like, it can just be so simple. Like, give yourself the joy of something that society has taken away from you, which is like going and sitting still in nature. Like, it seems like ridiculous to me now, because it's like, why would I not do that? But at that point in my life, I was in such like a sympathetic nervous system, like protection mode, like I was going nuts. And it's just like, you got to find that first thing that lets you relax and receive whatever it is. And you said there's many modalities. I love nature because, that's a big part of what we've lost.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Nature is instantly medicinal in a lot of ways.
right.
And one of the things that we really need is, and so we tend to have conversations that center the experiences of people who have been experiencing that very worst kind of invisible violence. And one of the things that gets lost in communities experiencing that kind of severity is that one of the most primary things that we need others to have, people who are not affected by that worst kind of invisible violence, who have not been directly most violently trafficked in certain ways, or have undergone really long-term life-threatening conditions that maybe kept them in a room for many years or decades, or there are lots of different ways that this happens. What we really need is for people who have more able-bodied privileges to truly recognize what their privileges are and what privileges in the community act to protect everyone from hardship. So that if a person who can reach nature centers themselves and stabilizes themselves and makes their body healthy and allows themselves to be able to perceive accurately and forestall gaslighting, no gaslighting, and be able to make clear decisions, those are the people who then can act in their community to prevent the worst kinds of invisible violence that are preventing so many people in severe circumstances from even being able to reach nature. So many people in our network would like to just go take a walk and can't, because the members of their community don't know enough about how to protect themselves and how to protect their own health, so that they can be accurately perceiving what's happening in communities and building community structures that allow everyone to access community resources. Instead of what's happening in many communities is there's this portion of the community that's set aside for traffickers, because nobody knows they're there and nobody knows how to help them. And their languages have been changed through extreme trauma, so that unless we make a practice every day of learning to understand one another, people don't understand what's happening to these people. But the major block preventing communities from solving this problem, among other things, is often that individuals in a community don't know the simplest things about how to care for themselves, don't know how medicinal nature is, don't know how important it is to be able to be still and quiet and with oneself for periods of time, and making one's own decisions rather than just sort of accepting pre-made decisions from around one's environment. We need people to step out of that kind of unfortunate hypnosis in order for our communities to be able to collaborate and act together to prevent all of the different kinds of violence that are occurring. Did that come out making sense? These words, some of these, I'm expressing some of this stuff fresh after a bunch of different educational experiences have come through. So I hope I'm stringing words together in
I
the
think
right order.
no, you are. I'm tracking with you, and your energy is very clear to me. And I feel very, I appreciate how you're framing this, because it's so vast. Like we were just talking about this, and you're right. It is learning how to take care of yourself is important for all of us, for all these reasons, not just for ourselves, not just for our family, but we are like, what affects us affects others in such a deep way we don't even know. And I appreciate hearing you frame it that way, because that's powerful to me. Like, I'm like, whoa, that's really sacred. Like that I can have an impact on someone else in a profound way based on, treating myself good. Wow. Wow. And I don't always see the manifestation of that, right? Because I'm talking on a podcast and people don't always write to me and tell me, but when they do, it's like, wow, okay, well, I'll keep going. I'm not going to stop anyway, but like, it is very much fuel to see that ripple effect. Right. And so, no, I appreciate hearing it that way, because it brings me joy to know that we really do need each other. I think that's the other thing, honestly. So because of, I have my own story of trauma, PTSD, all this stuff. And I felt like I had to protect myself for so long.
I wanted to ask you earlier I wonder if you want to tell any parts of your story. People in our network are coming from very extreme places and everybody's stories are different, but I wonder if there are parts of that you would want to share while we're talking, or we could talk again.
Yeah. I mean, basically grew up in a punitive family, believed that, beating your children was of God, the whole religious, spare the rod, spoil the child concept, but it was, done in anger, done in rage. And so that's how I started my childhood, which led to, me not being aware on how to make conscious, healthful choices in relationship, which led to a series of abusive relationships, both in another church setting and in my marriage. And so my experience of that was very horrific, but I didn't see it for a really long time. I felt it. And my body, of course, shut down in a million ways. Holy moly. And I somehow managed to have 4 kids and somehow raise them. I don't know how at that time. Like, it was almost like I wasn't there, but I was there or something. Sometimes I think back, I'm like, gosh, I feel like I have gaps in my memories of some things. And it makes me sad. They are coming back. But it was harder to leave that experience because the people around me were also entwined in abusive, gaslighting type of context, both in a church or maybe a relationship, or their belief of who God even is. I mean, yikes. And, I really wanted allies, and it was like I needed at least one ally to help me give myself that permission, because I was so confused and so lost and so hurting. And it was only one person who had to say, when I told her a story of what was going on, she says, "Oh my gosh, are you safe?" She's like, "Are you safe? Lydia, are you safe?" And I was like, I honestly do not feel safe. I feel terrified, but I didn't feel I had the permission with anyone else to say that prior to that question. And that opened up an enormous, like, let's call it a portal, if you will, because all of a sudden I was like, holy shit, am I safe? I don't even know. I'm terrified on the daily and I want to run away, And so that was huge for me. And so, and of course, it was really hard to find anyone who agreed with me wanting to do what I wanted to do to alleviate this abusive situation. It took years before I could leave. And so that was unfortunate in a huge way, because had I had even just a couple people, who knows, right? I mean, we have to go through it how we go through it. I know, but gosh, if I could help anyone bypass and shortcut and like hurry up, out, exit out, like good grief, right? Like, why would we want to stay in that? But I guess what I was getting at was, once I was out of all of that, and my body just finally said, hey, you're allowed to now feel everything. You weren't feeling it because you were protection. You were like in this hypervigilant protection mode. And now all of a sudden you don't totally have to be there, but your body's still going to like be triggered to do that because it's like a pattern. But all of a sudden my body was able to just like fall apart. You know what I mean? Like just break down and reveal to me how hard that really was for me to hold that up for so long. And so I had severe reactive hypoglycemia, to the point where I don't even know how I had 4 small children. Nobody was helping me. And I almost blacked out and passed out so many times. And for about 9 months, I literally had to eat around the clock to like not feel like I was going to faint. It was crazy.
Wow.
And so I recovered that. And then I, ended up meeting a few people, but then they just weren't also the right people either. So it was like hermit mode came into existence because I didn't know where to find people that understood how to support me truly. Almost everyone's struggling these days. There's a lot of burnout collectively. Society doesn't make it easy. And I just thought, okay, well, I'm going to do the self-love route, which is very important, but it's not all there is. We really do come from an ancestral way of the tribe. The tribe really was necessary. And we just don't have that the same way anymore. And so now I'm in a beautiful space of, allowing for that community to come in, because I've done so much healing and it came at a cost, and it was, long, I don't want to say the word fought because that just feels wrong, but in a way it was. I guess it was just that unstoppable spirit that knew I had to keep going and keep shifting and keep like, this isn't why I'm here to just live like this. Like I there's so much more. There's more beauty. There's more ease, flow, joy. And I just knew that I had to find that in my life and arrive at a place of at least, experiencing that in my daily. Do you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
all that to say, we need the tribe, but it's when you've become so suppressed like that, it's really hard to find who you're able to trust. So, you sharing what you shared really does circle back to, this whole like, wow, it is so important. You're right. For anyone who's able to show that healing journey, to show what it can take and how simple it can be, but also to do and be it, because it does affect each other, right? And so I love that. You just made me have like a little a little additional moment on that topic.
I really, really appreciate your sharing. Ease and flow. We talk a lot about how in building real communities, not communities with all of our community bonds stripped away by commercialism, but real communities where people have relationships with one another and know one another and help one another and feel safer in the presence of one another. We talk about like this multi-generational community wealth. We're building, we're recognizing, and we're building, because all of our conceptualizations about how money works and about how families are supposed to interact and about how communities are supposed to interact, they've all been so influenced by some shady stuff. And when we're rebuilding that together, like from the very essence of ourselves, like emerging and solving all of these problems, it's recognizing our wealth, our inherent wealth, the wealth that is taking care of our bodies and honoring one another's experiences and learning from all of the different languages that living beings speak in our environments. And so like for us, a lot of the time, we have a hard time talking about pleasure because we have been denied being able to talk about health. Like my body feels better and more healthy if I can be respected in these ways. Oh, I'm not allowed to be respected in those ways. I'm not allowed to be healthy. I'm very confused. This is very painful. I'm not allowed to say things. But if we recognize health, and we say, I'm allowed to be healthy, and we recognize pleasure, say, I'm allowed to feel good. I facilitate myself in feeling good. I facilitate myself in being healthy. And right there in that, and people building relationships with one another in communities, that's multi-generational wealth that we're growing. And so Venus has stationed direct, and we have this sense that we actually may know, like in our heart fields, we may know a lot more about how to be resilient and how to have resourcefulness in our communities so that everyone can be cared for, everyone can have their needs met, travelers on the road can visit at locations, like people don't have to be afraid of one another, people can have a means of respecting one another and learning about one another. It doesn't have to be co-opted in the ways that it has been, but everybody's really experiencing trauma about it. So it's like the more we talk about reclaiming health sovereignty and the recognition that we deserve to be in contact with what is pleasurable in our living bodies while we are here on this planet, to honor our living bodies, and that there is a wealth that comes about because we recognize that with one another, like having conversations like this and putting it on a platform and saying, this is possible. We can do this together right now. We can focus on this. Yes, there are lots of problems, but look how many of the problems get solved so effortlessly when we focus on this. So that's been coming up for me a lot, listening to your podcasts.
Ooh, love it.
There are a bunch of really exciting intersections, and I'm not sure how, like, I thought I'd come into conversation with you and I'd be like, all right, which of these intersections are you already talking about that I don't know? Because clearly you're talking about some of them. So I'm really excited about these conversations.
Yeah, well, it's so fun, and it is helpful to have, I think you're touching on one of the things that I wanted to bring in so much when I started my podcast back up, was the pleasure aspect and following your bliss. Like, we don't even know what that is. We don't even have our own permission to know what that is, or, and I remember in my work, like asking women, well, what do you want? And they would just stare at me blankly, like, what do you mean? What do I want? I'm like, well, what do you want? Like, forget any responsibility, just forget it all. Just like take a magic wand. Let's play fairy, like whatever, and just wave it. And like, what do you want? And they would still just be there like, what? Well, and I'm just like, wow, okay, this is where we're at collectively. Like, we don't even know what we want anymore.
Yeah.
And it broke my heart because for years I remember just sitting in this apathy of like, ugh, like nothing excites me. And that's not me. And it's like, what is happening? I hate this. It's so heavy and hard to shake. And so when I came to the decision of putting the podcast back out, it was like this call to heal the divide between like the hypervigilant woman who identifies as mother only or duty only or whatever, and, you know, bridge that gap back to our whole being. Like, we are sensual. We are um designed for pleasure. I mean, think about it. I mean, it's like our senses, our taste, our sight, like, you know, and we've lost it so much in the infrastructure of society in all ways. And so that was one of the things that really called to me. But what I've noticed is that it's so hard to go straight to talking about pleasure because everyone's still so stuck over here in this, like, I got stuff to do. I don't have time. You know, this story that we're telling ourselves, which is totally not true. But like you said, we've been co-opted into this like duty machine of 24/7, 365, go, 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 lights on all the time. Like, ah! So, yeah, so bringing back the pleasure is so important because, but if you're still stuck in the infrastructure of society, what it's dictating or trying to dictate to many of us, you will feel this like, this challenge to receive anyone bringing the concept of pleasure to you, because it's like this, it's almost like this instant, like, I can't have that. Like, it's like a grief, it's like a pain, it's a heartache. And I don't think people can put words to it until they realize, well, you've been put in this system that's literally crushing your whole spirit and who you are entirely supposed to get to be. And women, may we ever tend to hold guilt and shame? Holy moly, do we ever? And it's not fair, because that's not what's happened. It's not your fault.
It's abusive. I mean, it's being embedded in abuse modalities that we're trained not to call out as abuse modalities. If no one's ever allowed to recover, to feel pleasure in their body because their body is strong and healthy, because they can recover from stress or from difficulty, that's abuse. And if it's embedded in all of our environments, what happens is, and we document this very specifically, that if people are being prevented from being able to feel their own pleasure and take charge of their own pleasurable experience, the body's need for pleasurable experience gets used against them in all these different ways, that people are co-opted because they're so starved for contact or good feelings or any kind of like general satisfaction or contentment, that when something is offered to them, the body is compelled in all of these different ways to accept a gift from trafficking organizations that want you to conduct your lives in particular ways. So like, here's a way to feel good that's socially acceptable. But unfortunately, what's socially acceptable might be feeding trafficking operations. So it's really important for us to know what feels good and why it feels good, and to know what the fundamental basis of that is when we are honoring living beings, when we are respecting the living beings in our environments. Because otherwise, pleasure is used to say, oh, well, I've got to feel relief in some way, so these beings are hurt because I am going to feel pleasure in this way because it's the only thing I can think of. Because this company that makes a lot of money hurting people is offering me a chance at some kind of relief or some kind of enjoyment, and I'm going to take it because I don't know what else to do. We can take charge of how we feel good. We can feel good on purpose in ways that improve our lives and improve our environments. We don't have to accept gifts of feeling good from violent influences. And that's really big for me and for others.
That's, yeah. I like how you framed that because, I don't even know how to put words to what I'm feeling right now, but it's so huge. And it's like, it's just everything. And I feel like that's in a way been the silver lining of these last 2 years, because it's like an unfortunate wake up, but like like, okay, there's crazy things going on. Maybe we should look a little bit more. Some people have, some people haven't, but I think some people are now starting to more. And I don't know, for me, it's just amplified that I'm heading in the right direction. And so I'm just excited to keep going now, because it's like, whoa, let's have more pleasure and joy, and let's just have a joy fest and a love fest and all get together. But I'm going to sit with what you just said, because that was a really helpful way to see it. I feel like it was just really powerful for me.
I'm really grateful for this conversation. Thank you for making some time in your schedule.
Yeah, of course.
I'm so grateful to be able to share our conversation with more others in the network. And if you and I may have an opportunity to talk again, we could unpack more of this stuff. I feel really inspired to get to speak at these intersections with others who are I mean, like, you're clearly experiencing the meaning and the physical health benefits of focusing on these kinds of conversations. And that's something that I and we really want to center a lot. And I'm really glad to be talking to you about it.
Yeah, well, conversations can be incredibly powerfully healing, like you're saying. And so we have a lot to unravel. So it's good stuff.
What's the best URL for us to share to make sure people know where to find your blog and your podcast?
So my podcast is A Joy to Be Me, and you can find it anywhere you listen: iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify. And my website is a little clunky, but I will spell it out for you. It's Lydia Joy. Hold on. Lydia Joy. It's like lydiajoy.mykajabi.com. But I will give you the link so you can have it.
And I'll put it with the video too.
And then I'm also at Lydia Joy Me on Instagram.
Is that all one word, Lydia Joy Me?
It's lydiajoy.me.
Oh, lydiajoy.me on Instagram. Okay, I didn't find that yet. My Instagram functions are sort of compromised. Oh, great. Thank you.
See that? It's backwards.
Oh no, it's not. It's not backwards for us. It maybe it's backwards for you.
lydiajoy.me. And A Joy to Be Me is my podcast. And then my website, everything's there too. And yeah.
You made my morning really good. Thank you for making my morning so good.
Well, thank you. It was fun.
Can we say, is there a public address on Telegram for Health Freedom for Humanity Pennsylvania? It's a private, or
I'll give you the link, because it's weird like to try to say it out loud, but yeah,
whatever is the link to share for people in Pennsylvania who want to connect with Health Freedom for Humanity. I want to make sure to include that too.
Oh, absolutely. We would love to have you. Yeah, it's beautiful connecting with our state. It's been a lot of fun. It's been big.
It's amazing. I haven't processed it yet. I'm still processing it. I'm in contact with all of these people.
I know. I just went to an event yesterday for the Greater Reset that has been happening this past week. And it was just like an activation watch party Of course, we didn't watch a whole lot because we were too busy getting to know each other and seeing everyone's booths and the amazing things they're up to, and like feeling these like amazing soul connections and all this love, and like found a lot of leadership in that room, let me tell you. And I was like, whoa, I need to speak with all of you again. Like, let's hang out because this is like amplifying me. So yeah, so that's what's been really beautiful about the Health Freedom for Humanity PA group, is just watching this unfold. And wow, my heart is so full from these connections.
Yeah, let's keep doing what we're doing. We're doing good.
Yeah, it's fun.
I feel this is a pleasurable experience to do this kind of work.
Yeah.
And more and more people are able to connect to the pleasurable nature of helping one another and being present for one another and building beautiful things together.
Community, yeah. And
great.
Yeah. It's multifaceted, but the ultimate feeling is just such joy, right?
Blessings to Joy. Blessings to you. Thank you for making my morning so great.